One of the important conversion factors on any website or any web page is design. And in this video, you'll discover 5 simple rules to follow to make sure that you can use design as a competitive advantage and avoid the most common mistakes. Hello, I'm Shane from Thrive Themes, and design is as important a conversion factor on a web page as the copywriting is, especially in the first few seconds, because design creates this emotional response. We get a gut feeling based on design. Just like we can't help but form an opinion in just a split second about a person the first time we meet them based on their appearance, we can't help but have that gut reaction about a web page. So if I presented myself like this, you would probably have a hard time taking anything I'm saying seriously. And it's the same with a web page, right? We just can't help but have a response to the visual appearance of something. So for your websites, it's the same thing, right? If it looks unprofessional or messy, then you're just not inclined to want to stick around, and you're not inclined to trust that website enough to buy something from it. So here are 5 simple design rules you can follow as a non-designer to make sure that the design on your pages is a competitive advantage that you make use of. Rule number 1 is to outsource your design work. And okay, at first that seems pretty obvious, right? Basically get the professionals to do what they're good at. So the design stuff on your sites and pages should be done by professional designers. But of course, that is not always an option, right? If you would have to pay for a designer to do custom design for everything you publish, then, well, that's quite expensive. And as a solopreneur or a startup, you probably can't afford that. But luckily, there are other ways to outsource the design work. And an important way to do that is to use templates, themes, and things that are pre-designed by a professional designer. And this is, of course, something we also provide here at Thrive Themes. So if you use one of our themes or one of our templates, you're basically getting someone's professional design work for you to use. Plus, in our case, you're not just getting design work, you're basically getting the collaboration of a professional designer and a conversion expert that have infused as much of that expertise into the page already. But that's one way to almost borrow design work, right? To make sure that the design work on your site is done by a professional designer without having to pay that designer directly. Another way to do it is to steal like an artist, right? To basically look for inspiration, look for work that other designers have done and base your design on that work. Another important point here is about efficiency, right? It's if you are not a designer, if your job isn't to do design work, then any time you spend on design is probably not very well spent, right? You're good at something else, and it's probably better for your business if you spend time in the field where you're good at, rather than if you spend your time tinkering with design. Rule number 2 is to keep it minimal. So this applies to anything where you do end up, making your own customizations or do end up building something from scratch. Keep the design minimal. So, minimal layouts, minimal color palettes, and so on. And there are several advantages to doing this. One of them is that it's easier to still make it look professional even if you're not a designer. So if you try and do like a really complex and involved design yourself, chances are it will end up looking amateurish, right? It will end up looking just not quite right. Whereas if you keep things minimal, chances are you can actually make it still look quite professional. Another advantage relates to the point I said before. If you keep the design minimal, you'll be spending less time on it, right? So you won't be wasting your precious hours in this area of work that's not really your expertise, and that's going to be good for your business at the end of the day. And another advantage is a speed advantage. So, I've talked at length about the benefits of fast loading pages. And in general, a simpler design, if you have a page with a simple minimal design, that will probably load faster than a more complex and heavy design on the same page. Rule number 3 is keep it consistent. So this is another simple design rule where you just want to have consistency in your design. For example, if you have a subheading on a sales page and it has a certain font size, a certain placement like alignment, then you want to use that same font size, color, alignment, and so on for all the other subheadings on the page. And the same goes, you have one kind of paragraph text and you use the same font and you use the same font size, same line height, and so on. You keep that consistent. So, or another way to say that is, the more different fonts and font sizes and colors and alignments you mix on a page, the more messy and chaotic it will look. And so that's an example concerning text, and the same is true for, colors, like use the same few colors, repeat the same colors. It also applies to things like, images, like use the same kind of image styles and image borders to keep everything consistent on the page. That's one of the easiest ways to make sure that a design still looks professional. And it also gives you an advantage because you can deliberately break that consistency to guide a reader's attention. So if you always use the same colors all throughout the page, you can have one section on the page with a completely different color, with a contrasting color, and that will grab attention, right? That will really stand out. Whereas if you're just constantly mixing and matching everything, then the whole page looks chaotic and nothing stands out. So it gives you the advantage of being able to guide and direct your reader's attention if you follow the rule of consistency. Rule number 4 is to focus on readability. So keep in mind that the copy on your page is still an extremely important factor. And it's still, once you've caught someone's attention, once you haven't turned them off in the first few seconds and they start engaging with your content, now the copy on the page is the most important thing. And it is what will, make the sale or get the conversion or turn that reader into a fan. It is your text much more than your design. With that in mind, you should ensure that the text on your page is always easy and pleasant to read, easy to follow. And any design, like color choices and so on, should support the readability and the clarity of the text on the page. And this is also something where if you work directly with designers, this is something where sometimes you have to rein them in a bit, right? Because sometimes they might create something where you have to say, okay, this looks really nice, this looks really fancy, but it's actually kind of distracting, right? Like all this design is distracting from the text, and the text really matters. So sometimes you have to, again, kind of, make it simpler, rein it in a bit, make it simple and readable over making it fancy and spectacular. Rule number 5 is to pay close attention to the visual hierarchy of elements on your page. Now this is a big one. The visual hierarchy is basically the way the design subtly communicates about what is important and what isn't on the page. And a test you can do for this is the blur test. So that's where you take a screenshot of the page and then you blur it out so that you can't actually read the text or recognize the images anymore. And you take a look at these blurry shapes to see, just based on the size and color and contrast, what stands out the most. If the design is well done, then the most important parts on the page will be the ones that stand out the most, and the least important parts will be the ones that you can't really see very well anymore. So to give you an example of what this means in practice is, if you have a blog post, the most important element of a blog post is the title of that post. That's what should get everyone's attention first, and that's what will determine whether someone's going to actually read that post or not. One of the least important elements on a blog post is, let's say, the publish by date, so the date when the post was published, right? If you have a design where the publish date of the post is as attention grabbing as the title, or maybe even more so, then that is a problem of visual hierarchy. All right, so those are my 5 tips for non-designers for how you can use design as a competitive advantage in your business. Now, as a bonus, you can also get a list of my favorite design resources. So things like, where to get free images and free icons and stuff like that. All of my favorite resources that I use for design work, I've compiled them for you, and you can get them on the Thrive Themes blog below this video. All right, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. And if you like this, or if you have any other questions, please leave a comment below. I'll see you soon.